Hi everyone, David and Gino here, taking a look at one of a couple of graded stakes on Saturday at Saratoga. Race 10 is the Grade 3 Lake George, going the 1 mile distance on the inner turf for 3-year-old fillies. And Gino, never a surprise to see Chad Brown have a strong hand in races like this. I think I pegged him as the top two choices on the morning line, with the number 2 oversubscribed and the number 6 Sweet Rebecca. Both horses coming in with some credentials, but this is a pretty wide open race.
Yeah, I think of the graded stakes races that you and I are going to preview for Saturday, this one is definitely the more betting of the two races, the one that you can probably get a little bit better of a price and feel like you have an opportunity in here. We'll have a shorter field in the other, but fun division of races, right? When we have these young fillies going long on the turf, I think we can see some chaos. If you're a trip player, you might be able to find some that you like in here, or just some horses that you were waiting for to get a chance to go a little bit longer on the grass.
Yeah, definitely. It's a race where you could make a case for a lot of horses within this field. To get a sense of how this race might be run through the early stages, let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector. And no surprise to see a sprinter stretching out on the lead with the number 3, Monima Gold. She's a horse that definitely has some questions to answer regarding surface, but we have seen her show some good speed in dirt sprints prior to this. So I would imagine the intentions would be to go forward with her stretching out around 2 turns.
Yeah, she's a real wild card too, because a lot of times we weren't sure what her speed would translate like from Maidan over here to the US. And we actually saw her in a sprint race show some pretty good tracking speed. That should very much translate well stretching out here on the turf, I think, against this group. So yeah, would not be shocked at all to see her right on the front end or sitting very close.
And I don't know how much pace we're going to get in this race. The number 8, Pounce, has tactical speed, but she's one that has shown some versatility with regard to her running style. The 10, Magic Cross, is another horse trying turf for the first time, so not really sure how much speed she's going to show on the surface. So definitely a little bit of a murky pace scenario. Not exactly sure that we're going to have a blazing pace up front, which could work against a horse like the number 5, Gala Brand, who's actually the one missing from the pace projector. She's considered a deep closer, but she does have the LP flag indicating that she has the highest Timeform US late pace rating in the field. Let's go through these horses in program number order, beginning with the number 1, Gavea. And she's a horse that I think we're still learning things about. She debuted in France as a 2-year-old, made a favorable impression when she made her US debut for Alstall in September of last year, then kind of a head-scratching performance in the Chelsea Flower, where she was eased. Came off the layoff last time in the Grade 3 Regret against some decent fillies at Churchill Downs, and I thought she ran pretty well after attacking the pace.
Yeah, and when you look at horses like this, David, I think when a lot of times when there's that one bad race or kind of an outlier race, and then it's followed by a long layoff, as handicappers, we're usually able to be a little forgiving and just kind of make the case that something may have went wrong because they had gone off for such a long period of time. So I mean, I like the overall form with Gavia. It's pretty tough to knock. I think she needs to improve a little bit, but why can't she? She's shown us improvement in each of her starts so far, and now she'll put 2 starts together. She'll make her second start as a 3-year-old for a very capable barn who's had a nice start to the meet. Yeah, I don't really have any knocks. She's going to be one of my selections in here, but I picked her more underneath just a couple others that I like. Would not shock me at all to see her run very well and kind of sit a nice trip, saving ground from the inside.
Yeah, and I like to look at the Timeform US speed figures as well. She's actually coming off the highest Timeform US speed figure of anybody in this field last time, getting a 109. And I think that number was somewhat validated when Pinup Betty came back to finish a good 4th in the Belmont Oaks in her next start. So Gavia, an interesting price player in this Lake George. The number 2, oversubscribed, is the likely favorite in this race. We'll take a look at her most recent victory when she won the Wild Applause, coming from well off the pace at Aqueduct. However, this was a race that really set up perfectly for her. It was a well-orchestrated plan by Chad Brown, who sent his other horse up to challenge her main rival, Makanga, who just set unreasonable fractions on the front end. And unsurprisingly, even though she took a big lead into the stretch, Makanga came back to the field and oversubscribed, was able to reel her in. She does produce a really strong stretch kick to make up about 10 lengths in the lane, but the pace definitely contributed to that visual impression. She's a horse who showed ability in her first couple of starts, not ideal trips either time. And I think we saw the kind of speed figure she can produce last time. And if she repeats it, she's going to be tough in here.
They have 0 knocks on her overall form. My only concern with her in this particular race is how you and I were talking about the unsure pace scenario, that she's a horse who definitely needs a little bit of pace, or at the very least, she wants to drop back, settle, and then she's going to have to pass a lot of horses. And many times you can get stuck in traffic. You can deal with just a race shape that's just not to your liking. So while I would not play any type of any type of exotic without her, like an exacta try or a super, I can understand anyone would be a little trepidatious playing her on the win end with that late running style, and maybe a couple others who could have, a real advantage on her tactically in this race.
And she's going to be a pretty short price going out for the
Yeah.
bar. She does, coming off that victory last time. She's been short prices in all of her races so far, and I think this is a slightly tougher spot, especially given the presence of some new faces like the number 3, Monica Gold, and she's trying turf for the first time here. Interesting that she was racing over in Dubai over the winter, and they elected to race her on dirt over there because, we'll talk about, she actually does have plenty of turf pedigree, but she obviously showed ability racing on dirt through the first 3 starts of her career, came over to Todd Pletcher in the U.S., initially was talked about as potentially a Kentucky Oaks horse, but they took a step back with her as she took a little longer to come to hand. Made her U.S. debut in the Jersey Girl. I thought she ran fine, was just no match for Almost Gone Rocket, but switching to the turf, her speed figures to be dangerous, and Gino, she's got pedigree for this surface.
Yeah, the Dam was a 4-time. The Dam was a stakes winner on the turf and a 4-time winner. And this is a horse who's a full sibling to turf sprinter that we've all become very familiar with recently, named Overcharged, who's a 15-time winner and who's won 7 in a row, I believe, and is 5 for 5 on the grass. 2 other turf winners, so plenty of turf pedigree there. And you were kind of setting up the narrative and the story for this one, right, David? With horses like this who are so successful overseas or somewhere else outside of the country, and they have to come over. Sometimes they have to deal with like less than ideal circumstances when they come into a new bar. And this horse it wasn't always going how they wanted getting to the Kentucky Oaks. And you can even see in the work pattern, there are some gaps in the work. There was a 3-week gap in the work kind of right before the Kentucky Oaks, and then able to get back more recently. So Monica Gold with that sprint speed stretching back out, I think a real wild card here. A Group 3 winner, David, when we're looking at that horse, Almost Gone Rocket, that one earned a 99 buyer in winning that race. That's a really, really nice horse right now too. So I'm just expecting a really improved effort, and I think the race shape fits very well for Monica Gold in here. So I put those two together. No, I have a hard time. I get so excited when we do these videos that I usually I can't wait till the end to let everybody know who my top selection is, and this is the one I'm going to lean to.
Not really building that suspense. We're giving it away early, but
I don't have a poker face. That's why I play horse racing, David. I'm not a poker player.
Let's move on to the number 4, Vuv, and to give it away as well. I'm also interested in Monica Gold in this race. But as for the horse drawn to the outside of her, this Jack Sisterson trainee, she's another one that came in from Europe for new connections in November of last year, made her U.S. debut at Gulfstream, has really come a long way since then, broke her maiden at 5-1 at Gulfstream back in February, and then caused a bigger upset in the Sanibel Island, winning at 16-1, making a big rush from the back of the pack in a race that had an exciting finish. Tried the Wonder again last time, where she faced off against Sweet Rebecca, who will also be in this race. And I thought she didn't get the most ideal trip. She was never really towards the inside, to go a little wide around the far turn. Got there in mid-stretch, couldn't quite seal the deal that day. Maybe turning back to the mile is going to suit her, because it didn't seem like she really finished off the 9 furlongs last time.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. I thought she kind of flattened out a little bit, and she's probably one of my tougher reads in this field, because based on speed figures, she does fit pretty well with a lot of this group, and she seems like she's heading in the right direction. I think when it comes down to it, she's one of those horses when you handicap races where you feel like you don't have a whole lot of knocks on them, but you just like others more. I would not be surprised at all to see her run well in here, but I can't really play it out because I do think there are a couple other closers that can kind of have a better turn of foot. I think from a tactical standpoint, there are a few others that might be better positioned in there. So wouldn't be a shock to see her at the bottom of the exotics. And I don't really have any knocks on her overall as a horse.
The number 5 is Gala Brand, and we saw some nice things from her as a 2-year-old at Saratoga last summer, beating the boys in the Grade 3 with anticipation, taking her spa record to 2 for 2. She's lost all 3 starts since then and has actually finished off the board every time. I can make some excuses for her in the Miss Grillo last year when she got a little too far back, trying to navigate through traffic. Also, the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies turf just didn't set up for her from a trip or pace standpoint. I think the big question with Gala Brand, though, now coming back second off a layoff, is, was she just a precocious 2-year-old, and has she really taken that step forward from her juvenile season now to sophomore season?
Yeah, and if we were looking to play her, this doesn't feel like the type of race shape that would fit very kindly to her, right, David? So she may be one of those horses that, just based on what you're saying, we kind of make a little note for her, or you put her in one of your stable mails, or just kind of keep an eye on her for a race that would shape up a little bit better. And then you can give her a chance where you feel like there's a little more pace to run at. But in here, where we're not sure if they're going to be going all that fast and contested early, and then if they do, is she going to outkick a horse like Oversubscribed late? I'm not quite sure there. But I do agree with you that she does have a little muddied up form because of her running style, and that can sometimes kind of hide a horse and can keep them as a price horse for later down the line. So I will keep an eye on her, and maybe there'll be a race later in the meet or in a couple starts where there's a lot of speed in there and it could set up well for her. Although even when that seems to happen nowadays in U.S. racing, we very rarely get those contested paces, especially in a race like this on the grass. But yeah, there's something there with her. I'm just not sure if this is the right spot.
Warsaw appears to have a little bit more tactical speed as the number 6, Sweet Rebecca, but she's another one who has some questions to answer coming into this race. She really generated some buzz over the winter when she made that auspicious debut at Gulfstream back in March, was privately sold after that for what I would imagine was a large sum of money. I know the connections that bought her initially had some Royal Ascot intentions with her and looked like that kind of candidate after winning the Memories of Silver, which we'll take a look at here. She was very impressive this day with those big strides coming from off the pace, angling out to the 2-path in upper stretch to run this field down. In retrospect, I'm not really sure how good this Memories of Silver field was, and I say that especially in light of her performance last time in the Wonder Again, where she was really disappointing as the 3-5 favorite. I don't think she got the ideal trip in the Wonder Again. She kind of got that outside no man's land trip with no cover throughout, but still, the results you would have hoped would be better, because finishing 5th of 6th as the 3-5 favorite was very disappointing.
Yeah, that's the key, right? Not winning with that trip would have been okay by me if we would have seen a much closer finish or just a better late. Because I'm fine even saying that maybe she didn't want to go that far and we can cut her back a little bit. But against that group, I still would have liked to see her show a little bit more late, because that was a softer group than this field that she's going to face. So yeah, well, I can understand some that may give her another chance and maybe give her a mulligan cutting back. I was very disappointed with not showing a little bit more in that race late. So for me, I'm going to be passing on her in this spot.
Yeah, I found her to be one of the most difficult calls in this race because the talent is there, but she's a little hard to take, especially if she's going to be a short price again off that last effort. The number 7 is De Regresso. She's one of the most experienced members of this field, making the 11th start of her career in this Lake George. And she didn't always look like this kind of graded stakes horse, but she's really gotten into strong form over the course of her last 3 races. She's won 3 in a row. One of those was in a dead heat for victory, but the last 2 have come by open lengths margins, one on the synthetic, on the turf 2 back, and she's looked good. She's earned speed figures that put her in the mix. I think it's just a question of whether she can step up against this quality of competition.
Yeah, and visually, I thought the Honey Rider was pretty nice too. She's pretty handy in this race, where she responds quickly to asking. So there was an opening, she was asked, she kind of moved, and she kind of quickly moved to the front end and opened up. Thought it was a good effort. I just feel like she seems a cut below some of the top if they were to show up with an A effort and really show up with one of their best races. But if we're just comparing horses, like, I would much prefer a horse like De Regresso than a horse like Sweet Rebecca, who we just talked about, who I have some concerns about. Sweet Rebecca. De Regresso, I feel like you kind of know what you're going to get. My question would just be, is even an A effort from that horse good enough to beat this group? But I'd feel much more confident about the consistent type of showing you get from a horse like De Regresso.
Yeah, I've got the same concerns as you about the caliber of competition she's facing here, but I pegged her at 6-1 in the morning line, and she's one of the horses I could actually see drifting up a little bit from there, because the strength of connections with other horses could pull money in that direction, and maybe she's one that gets lost on the board here. The number 8 is Pounce, and she's another one that's a little bit difficult to read. She's lacked some consistency through her recent starts, adapted well to a new running style when she won the Here Comes the Bride back in March, coming from off the pace, whereas her prior turf victory had come in gate to wire fashion. Went back to a more forward style in her last couple of races. Didn't work out for her in the Appalachian, where that pace just really came apart. And then last time in the Penn Oaks, she ran a lot better, but I didn't see a big excuse. And I think this is a race of similar quality, if not a tougher one.
Yeah, I agree. That effort in the Here Comes the Bride, that was a monster effort from her that day when she ran down 2 horses that were getting really really good trips, like much more beneficial trips than she got that day. She still was better than them. And I'm fine, just like you, when you're going through the horse's form, I'm fine completely eliminating the race following that at Keeneland when she was out wide and maybe may not have liked the turf course that day. I was a little disappointed with that last effort. It was a better effort, and it was, moving back in the right direction, but she got out front. It wasn't the fastest pace in the world. Sometimes those fractions at Penn can be a little misleading or be a little kind of tricky, but yeah, I have her in the underneath spots in here because I know she has a really high ceiling, and because we've seen her adapt to different types of running styles in order to win races. But I wanted to see a little bit more from her in that last race, David.
Got a couple of horses trying the turf for the first time, drawn towards the outside of the main body of the field. The number 9, Lemon Muffin, another one with plenty of experience coming into this race, making her turf debut in her 11th career start. She was on the Kentucky Oaks Trail earlier this year, actually broke her maiden in the Honeybee, causing an upset that day, and did make it to the Oaks. Didn't run that well behind Torpedo Anna that day, and hasn't really come back to form since then. So it feels like now they're just throwing their hands up in the air and seeing maybe she's a turf horse. We'll try it out. What's the downside in that? She actually does have a little bit of turf pedigree. I like the collecteds getting to the turf, and her dam has already produced a 3-time turf winner.
Yeah, I think 4 other siblings to try the turf. We had no winners, but I think a couple of them with some turf success where they showed that they hit the board. And when you don't have a really a big gauge for a lot of these horses, if they've only run a few times on the turf, you don't have a whole lot of sample size to go off of. Yeah, it's amazing how quickly things can kind of shift in horse racing too, because after she wins that Honeybee, she looked like a horse who had been knocking on the door for a while and just waiting to stretch out. And she was only 5-1 when she faced Torpedo Anna in what was a strange fantasy where Torpedo Anna was making her first start of the year. There were a couple real wild cards in there, and then she ran into Torpedo Anna twice in a row. She comes back in the Black Eyed Susan. They wanted to give her a little bit of class relief that day, and she just hasn't in both of her last couple starts. She really hasn't been able to show any improvement there. So I agree with you. It seems kind of like they're just kind of throwing something at the dartboard, and wouldn't be shocking to see her run well on the turf, but I have to see it first before using her in any exotics.
And the number 10, Magic Cross, also tried the turf for the first time, and she has the added hurdle of having to come off a lengthy layoff in this race. We haven't seen her in 11 months since she competed in the off-the-turf PG Johnson last year, which she did win by over 4 lengths against a scratch-depleted field. They obviously wanted to get her on turf last summer, that PG Johnson. She was entered for turf that day, and there is a little turf pedigree here. The dam was a turf winner. If you look a little deeper in the dam's family, the dam is a half-sister to a horse named Mose, who was a turf stakes winner. And the good magics can kind of go either way, probably a little bit more of a dirt influence, but interesting that they're immediately trying to get back on turf with her.
And yeah, from a pace standpoint, she's drawn towards the outside. I could see her being one of the horses close up early on and maybe putting a little pressure on a horse like Monoma Gold, or just getting a good trip in a race where there's not all that much speed. So could she maybe fall into it and be at the bottom of the exotics? Maybe, but you're right. It kind of just seems like let's get her on the grass. It's going to be the first start in a while. Let's get a race under her, and then we can see where to go from here. So I'll be a little bit kind of wait and see on Magic Cross. But I know as we move to the outside and the also eligibles, there are a couple in here that would be a little bit interesting if they were to draw into the field, right? I think there was one that you actually had on your radar.
Yeah, I mean, we've covered the main body of the field. I do want to mention one of those also eligible runners. We'll skip over Golden Degree. I kind of view her as a horse that's kind of a fake MTO in this race. She's probably going to scratch. Linda Rice has entered her as an MTO a number of times prior to this. The number 12 Goa, she would need one additional scratch aside from Golden Degree to get into the race. But she's competed 4 times over in France. I've watched a few of those races. I like what I've seen. She's shown some versatility. I think she's got a little bit of talent. And her last race has been extremely live. The second and third place finishers, Almara and Berth, who Goa just defeated in a photo finish, they came back and were first and second in the Group 2 Prix-Saint-Alaire a little bit later in the year. Actually, one of those horses did go on to finish 7th in the Group 1 French Oaks. So that's been a race that has proven to really pan out over time. And Goa now coming off a layoff, making her first start for Chad Brown. I think she's a little bit interesting if she does draw into this field.
So one to keep an eye on if we do get a couple scratches in here as we get to the moment of truth time. David, right? It's the time that everybody's waiting for. People probably fast forward a lot of times till the end to kind of get to the pick selection here. You're going to talk about the outside horse, though. Goa, that's who you actually have picked on top.
Yeah, I went with that horse. I'm just hoping for a couple of scratches. I really think we just need one from the main body of the field, aside from that expected scratch of Golden Degree. And I like what I've seen from her in the replays. It seems like she's training well over the dirt coming into this race. She's a filly that has a big long reach to her stride, and I just think she's going to be she's more talented than maybe it looks at first glance of her past performances, and she'll be the right price if she draws into this race. But Gino, I don't disagree with your top pick. Obviously, I've got that horse as my top selection among the main body of the field. The number 3, Monima Gold, could be the right kind of spot for her.
Yeah, I just feel like she's going to be a lot better version of herself than what we saw last time out. I think horses like this that have travel, and then when they come over and there's just little issues along the way, you could see Pletcher has always thought, I think, pretty highly of her and from where they wanted to place her. And now from her form, it all makes sense. That was a perfect start to get some of the rust off. And now you stretch out, try the turf, something that she's bred beautifully for. While this is a contentious group, and I think I could see a few different horses winning this race, I don't think there's any real monsters in here who would scare you. In particular, some of the horses who are probably their top contenders in here don't have the same sort of running style that Monima Gold has, and she should be able to work out her own trip in here, David.
Gino's got the number 3, Monima Gold on top. I've got her in there, but I put the number 12, Goa, from the also eligible list on top in the grade 3 Lake George on Saturday at Saratoga. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.